I think one of the things that opened up my eyes the most from our first couple talks and were how to position ourselves and differentiate ourselves, not from a product standpoint, but from an optic standpoint and from a strategic standpoint.
Welcome to the Outthink the Competition podcast, where we tell the stories of helping companies do the semi-miraculous. I'm your host, Bob Zager. Welcome, everyone. Today's story is about a company called Shedwool. Like many before him, the CEO, Corey Warfield, became an entrepreneur out of frustration. Since starting in the restaurant business at age 16, he had been involved in every aspect of the business. Perhaps more than any other industry, scheduling in the restaurant business can be a nightmare, and Corey had lived this repeatedly. From the Excel spreadsheet days to using actual software. Then came a seminal moment. The company he was working with was acquired and decided to eliminate the scheduling software that they deemed to be an unnecessary expense. The employees were so distraught over this decision, they volunteered to pay for the expensive program out of their own pockets. The company said no. To try and alleviate the headaches, they experimented with multiple ways to try and manage all the moving parts of scheduling. People who wanted days off, shift changes, people who called off, people who complained they weren't getting enough hours, etc. It quickly became apparent that without an interface to work with, everyone was going to be continually frustrated. This experience led Corey to an aha moment. There had to be a solution that would work to satisfy all parties involved. Being a thinker, Corey smartly reasoned that if scheduling was a pain for the hospitality industry, it was likely a pain for other industries as well. Thus, Shedwool was born. The goal? To create a scheduling software that would make things work well for employees, management, and ownership. And create it they did. There's an old saying, build a better mousetrap and the world will be the path to your door. Corey found out that simply isn't true. There's something to be said for ignorant enthusiasm. It will keep you going through those inevitable tough times of starting up a new business. Corey was like many first-time entrepreneurs. He didn't know what he didn't know. But he read a lot. He was astute enough to get involved in a business accelerator. Shedwool began to pick up some customers. For a while now, they've been keeping their heads above water. Barely. In his restaurant career, Corey was used to making six figures. What he's so far been earning as an entrepreneur doesn't even come close to that. But the dream of being an entrepreneur whose business makes a positive difference in the lives of many and has the potential to earn more than he ever could as an employee has a very strong pull. That's why he stuck with it. Shedwool was doing okay, but just okay wasn't what Corey had in mind when he started the company. There's another saying that goes, even the strongest person with the sharpest axe will eventually get tired and their axe will get dull. Oftentimes, working harder isn't the answer. So when Corey heard I was starting a show called Outthink the Competition, he got in line to be featured on the show. He had seen and heard about how I apply my knowledge, experience, and imagination to developing solutions for organizations to help them level up. One thing Corey had going for him that some business owners don't, he was humble enough to admit that he didn't know everything and needed help. So let's dive in and listen to when I first interviewed Corey about where they were to see if I could possibly help.
Well, hey, Corey, if you don't mind, take a minute and tell me just a little bit of backstory about Shedwool and what was the impetus for the idea and how did you guys get started?
Yeah, thanks, Bob, and thanks for having me. Quickly, I spent 20 years working in the restaurant and hospitality industry, both as a worker and as a manager, and scheduling was a nightmare. And after nearly 20 years, I kind of figured some things that I wished existed in the market. as far as software to help schedule your staff online. And I started a company, and it took us about a year to get to market with our first version. And then we had that for about a year, kind of listening to our customers, growing that base as we were building our second version. And today we're a robust platform where companies can schedule and manage their employees online.
Did you see something that was missing in what was available out there already?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we started 3 years ago, all the competitors were relatively simple, and they were all quite expensive. And because of the pricing, a lot of the small and medium-sized businesses weren't using anything. So I found that a lot of places were still using Excel or pen and paper, and it really not only affects the ownership and the profit and loss, but literally the labor percentage means the bonuses don't go to the managers, and it means that the staff don't make as much money. And so we introduced a product that costs quite a bit less, but we've also added some features that increase the time savings, because we also found, or I found, and my team discovered as well, that a lot of the products that are intended to help you save time take a lot of time to get started on. And so it's very counterintuitive. It's hard to sell somebody on saving them hundreds of hours if it's going to take them a dozen hours they don't have to get set up. So we just kind of figured that there were some ways to successfully optimize what was out there, price being one of them, features being another. And what this has evolved into is we can directly affect and tie into hiring and training and things of that nature that we hadn't seen any of our competitors do. So we've kind of addressed this more of an ecosystem through the lens of shift workers that have lived that pain point for decades, both with and without software.
Right. So specifically, what are some of the things that your product does, or functionality that it has, that maybe some of your competitors don't have?
Yeah, so one of the things that we offer that most of them don't have currently is a media upload. So you can upload a little video to train your staff or to update them on the day. You can also ascribe notes to the individual shifts. We've put together a drag and drop environment where you can copy and paste and drag shifts around that save quite a bit of time and have the visibility of your entire staff, or filter it through on one screen. And we find a lot of our competitors, it's very difficult to kind of discern between different departments or things of that nature. And so the filtering component of our platform is really nice. But our mobile apps are free. A lot of our competitors charge the employees. We have the direct inroads to the temporary and the hiring boards for those scheduling managers specific to shift work. So we're really trying to make it be a marketplace and a one-stop shop, and we haven't seen that in our competitors' offerings at this point.
So, Corey, one of the things that I found is that early on in launching a business, it's easy to have what I call ignorant enthusiasm, which you need, I think, frankly, in the beginning. But, then as time goes on, the reality that it's going to be a little harder than we thought sets in, and usually it feels like we're repeatedly bashing our head against the wall. And I call that the valley of despair. Talk a little bit about some of the things that you've gone through mentally and emotionally in building Shedwool.
Yeah, I mean, this ends up taking a different direction because for me it's been, I hear people often talk about, and I subscribe to the kind of roller coaster mentality where you have these crazy ups and downs and then get thrown for a loop and you should enjoy it all. But for me, I was having a conversation with a friend who's built a multi-million-dollar company and raised a fair amount of money, and she's, none of us are young, but she's significantly older than myself and much wiser. And I said that entrepreneurship thus far for these nearly 4 years has really been heaven and hell. And she kind of, was taken back by that. She said, I've never heard anybody describe it that way. But you're right, it really has been heaven and hell. And we kind of expounded upon that a bit, but I'm the guy where to kind of try to raise capital, and it's the only reason I was there and the only reason they accepted me. But I went through an accelerator program, and it was a 4-month program, and I guess they had decided, and the community had decided, without really letting me know in any form or fashion, that they just weren't going to invest in me. And so they told me, one of my lead mentors who had a big exit and had been, in as far as I knew, really thinking about putting some money into the company. And that's the whole reason they brought me out to this remote part of the country for 4 months, was to raise money. And he told me I might want to start looking at getting a day job. And I was the only full-time employee at the time. I had a team, I had a product, but we were still a free product back then. And when you're a free product, you can't raise money, and you're not making money, so there was no money. And he told me I should get a day job. And to me, that devastated me to such a degree that I heard him say he wasn't investing. I heard him say that he didn't think the company was going to make it. I basically heard him say that I should give up, and I took it fairly tough, and it upset me a lot, to the degree that the program put me under a 24-hour suicide watch, and ascribed a therapist, a psychiatrist, or psychologist rather, to me personally. And it really, I don't know that I would have actually taken my life, but I think that I was so distraught that externally that's what I projected. And thankfully the company survived and has now started thriving. But it got to the point where they didn't provide me with anything that I had felt they kind of told me to expect from the program. And so I told them at one point that I wanted to give them their money back, because they had put a little money in the company, and I wanted to give them the money back, and I wanted the 4 months of my life back, and I didn't have their money, and they didn't have my 4 months. So I just needed them off my cap table, and I thought it was going to get nasty. But I think they realized how badly the situation was for me, that they just relinquished my equity and gave it back, and that equity is now worth a fair amount of money on paper. But then so I came back to Chicago, went through another program, and it had its ups and downs as well, kind of, again, heaven and hell. But my relationship, I'm 10 years with the same woman. We've been married for 4 years, and we got married, and then I started the company. And it's been rough for her as well, and rough for our relationship. And even after getting home from that program, there was a day where, my co-founder's wife was also really distraught. And, she was upset with him for putting in hundreds or thousands of hours into Shedwool without a paycheck, of any sort. And, my wife's the same way. I was working 100-hour weeks and probably ignoring her and, not making a paycheck. So, once I put my life savings into the company and into covering the living expenses, it got pretty bad for a little bit. And so I think both our wives are really just hating us, hating the company, hating the journey. Definitely hell for both of them. And I think I was hearing from him that he might be willing to throw in the towel. I think he was almost over it. And without my technical co-founder, my CTO, my partner, the company actually would have died. And that's the closest. I went to the beach with my wife, and we just cried together. And I said, I didn't know if I could live, if the company didn't live, I might die with it. And not even a suicide thing. Like, it literally, you hear about people dying of heartbreak, and it was just really emotional. And our marriage had somewhat been suffering. And we kind of concluded there that it's one of the reasons I had grown this big LinkedIn network, is to get that affirmation from others that I was capable and that I was kind and wanted to help. Because at home, she was kind of just treating me at that point like I was a piece of crap, because she never saw me. I was always working. She wasn't seeing the fruits of those labors. And, things are now getting a little bit better. Now there's some money coming in, and she's not quite as worried, and she sees the big picture. I think finally she's hearing the conversations and seeing. So she doesn't come to the meetings per se, but she sees how happy I am coming out of some of them. So now things are a little bit better, and it's unfortunate that things, many people experience the same thing as in the entrepreneurial journey. It's really hard to balance things, and sometimes you have to be so all in that nothing else really matters. And thankfully, I think that, we are best friends, and I think that everything will survive this kind of, this long 4 year, and we're still in the thick of things. But, to anybody listening and anyone that's been there before, I'm sure that they can relate to a degree. But anyone that hasn't, not that necessarily, suicide watch and potential, heartbreak is imminent, but there are definitely ups and downs that go with anybody's entrepreneurial journey, and mine's been no different.
Well, I think you can probably really relate to that term, the valley of despair.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, that's listen, you've got quite a story, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs can relate, and even people who aren't entrepreneurs can probably relate to some of those feelings of frustration. And so I appreciate you sharing that with us.
It was clear to me after our initial conversation that having a quality product wasn't Shedwool's problem. I also got the feeling that even though they were beginning to have some wins, there was still something missing. Privately, I counseled Corey that customers make a judgment of quality based on the price you're asking. This is especially true in a competitive marketplace. I told him that with the rollout of the next version, which was imminent when we talked, they needed to dramatically increase the pricing to reflect the actual value. Often, a strategy based on trying to buy the market by selling at a low price backfires. It's my opinion that this was the case for Shedwool. It's much better to win the market through strategies that help you provide a higher perceived value for existing and potential customers. This is what we help Shedwool with. Now, let's rejoin Corey in discussing the strategies we help them with and how he feels about the future of the company now. Note, this segment takes place a couple of weeks later.
All right, Corey. So let's talk a little bit here about some of the strategies that we worked on and I put together for you and your great team over there at Shedwool, and just give me a little bit of feedback on one, what you thought of them, and two, what you're doing with them.
Absolutely. So I think one of the things that opened up my eyes the most from our first couple talks and were how to position ourselves and differentiate ourselves, not from a product standpoint, but from an optic standpoint and from a strategic standpoint. And so we talked about a couple things. You know, we've been leveraging video for some time, but using it kind of more as a way to tell a story and to reach the right people. And there's just certain things that I hadn't really thought of from almost a psychological standpoint. And Bob, honestly, we've been working on some of the stuff that you postulated, and we're already seeing results. And we're in production with a video. The idea literally was verbatim came from you, and our team over at Google Marketing. They didn't use your exact words, but they all but literally said that it was freaking brilliant. So I'm really excited. But yeah, I'd say it really has me on fire to position ourselves differently through an optical and strategic lens. And we're already seeing results. So that's about all that needs to be said about that one.
Right. Yeah. That's well, isn't it kind of amazing that sometimes, and I found this, Corey, is that sometimes businesses aren't as far off as they might imagine. But if you're 1 degree off over time, that can have you way off course, right?
Oh yeah. Imagine if you're trying to send a rocket to the moon with 1 degree off.
Exactly. I actually did some funky math on that one time and figured out that you'd missed the moon by like over 3,000 miles.
And the moon's actually pretty darn close, so that tells you the order of magnitude. Right,
exactly. So let's talk about there was another strategy that we put together for you. It's not a video, but really this is more of a marketing and prospecting strategy. Have you found that sometimes prospecting is that's kind of a rejection-oriented activity? Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Especially we've done a number of kind of boots on the ground, door-to-door campaign that literally popped into prospects, and we do a lot on social media, and it's never well received. none of it, whether it's online or offline, it's been pretty much of a nightmare.
Right. One of the things that I've found is that oftentimes if you can just tweak what you're doing a little bit and sort of add value to that client in some way up front, that it just makes you appear different than everybody else that's in the marketplace. So do you mind just, I could talk about this, but I think I'd rather have you talk about one of the prospecting and marketing strategies that we talked about.
Absolutely. I would imagine that you're talking about the bourbon and business. Am I correct?
Correct.
So it is too cool. It's some of your listeners may know this, but for those that don't, I spent 20 years working in restaurants and hospitality before I started Shedwool about almost 4 years ago. And so certified sommelier, mixologist, worked in a lot of bars. I know way too much about beer, wine, and bourbon. I love bourbon. I've got an extensive bourbon collection in my cellar now. And what we're talking about doing is bringing people together, not only to kind of talk about the industry and obviously talk about Shedwool and the way that we save companies huge amounts of time and money and keep them compliant, but in a cool venue with kind of a cool backdrop, being the bourbon, and just kind of opening it up to a conversation facilitated by we at Shedwool. We can get a lot of the right prospects in, having a great time. We'll do some door prizes. And one of the brilliant things about it, in my perspective, is, as you mentioned, we add value right off the bat. Secondly, we're providing networking and fun, but it's also really filling our funnel because we'll have everybody's emails. We had to email them all about the event. And we can do some kind of one-offs where if you didn't win the door prize, we can reach out and have a consolation prize, and we'll offer discounts. And it's really just a way that I hadn't thought anything about, getting the right people in the right room. And I talk often about the K factor, which is the measure of virality. But if I can plant some seeds in there, help them build some relationships, they might go off and start talking about Shedwool amongst themselves afterwards. So it was a truly revolutionary way to think about prospecting.
Do you think it'll be a little easier inviting people to come and have a bourbon than it would be to talk about buying something from you?
Oh, with zero question.
Right? Hey, you get together over a glass of wine or a glass of fine bourbon, or even just a Coke, right? And you're buying, right? It's just there's a little bit more. That's a little bit more conversation worthy than the salesman that cold called you.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And even if from a KPI standpoint, it may or may not reduce our customer acquisition costs. We've been pretty fortunate so far to have a fairly low customer acquisition cost. However, I think that what it is going to do is it's going to get people talking about us. I think there's a chance that even though I like to do things pretty big, so I'll probably want to give away a bottle of Pappy or something crazy from your neck of the woods, and probably do something decent, some Michter's or something as the bourbon that I'm pouring. But whether or not it reduces our customer acquisition cost, it's going to have people just really feeling great about Shedwool. And it's a great way. I think we're going to be able to be so laser focused as to who we invite there. And a lot of times when we're prospecting, we end up talking to the wrong person and spinning the tires or hearing a no, and it turns out it wasn't the person that could have said yes anyway. This is going to be a great way to fill the room with decision makers. And who doesn't, they don't need to drink. They can, like you said, have a Coke, but who doesn't like to be in a room with people having fun talking about great ideas? And if one of them just so happens to be Shedwool and they can keep them compliant and save them a bunch of time and money, it may or may not, as I say, reduce customer acquisition cost, but it's absolutely going to spike customer acquisition. And at this point, we'd spend more money to get more customers. So to think that we can do it in a fun way that can pay dividends and it's going to get people talking, and that we can actually do some content on social around that's incredibly not salesy is hugely compelling.
Well, one of the things that I know for sure, Corey, is if you can associate the feeling that people have when they think about your company, if there's an emotionally fun component, if they feel good about your company, and forget your value proposition for a second, because it goes deeper than that, right? And when people have a good feeling that they get when they think about your company, and when you touch that positive emotion, then they're much more likely to be loyal customers. And even if it doesn't reduce your customer acquisition cost, it'll amp up your customer acquisition fun. And who doesn't want more of that, right?
Absolutely.
So let's talk about one more thing, and that is I think companies have to have a one-line benefit statement that identifies them and sort of spells out in very short and simple terms what the benefits are for the customer. So I know I spent a considerable amount of time on that because as short as it is, it's important. And what I came up with was Shedwool turn scheduling nightmares into pleasant dreams. And so give me a little feedback on what you thought about that, what your Google marketing team thought about that, et cetera.
Yeah, we all love it. It really is. I mean, the shorter the better, right? You don't want to make people work too hard. And within a few seconds in one statement, that really does tell you pretty much everything that we're doing. And as we move towards being more of an ecosystem and less specifically a scheduling software, the reality is it still all ties into scheduling. And so to kind of plant that seed and really just the nightmare to pleasant dreams thing, I think is really compelling. And so I did a video, little teaser video that people can see on YouTube or on Shedwool social platforms, and it's kind of in the style of a whiteboard animation. And at the end, the last or the second to last, I suppose, slide has a lady in a yoga pose with a huge smile on her face, and it says, that exact tagline that Shedwool turns scheduling nightmares into pleasant dreams. And I've already gotten, I put this up 2 days ago, Bob. I've already had at least 10 people say they love that tagline. A couple of them are internal with my company or on our board, within our circle. Some of them are strangers I've never spoken to before, don't know them from Adam. And they're going, wow, I really like that. That really resonates with me. And I will say that, whether some of it is perfect timing or if it's all just working with you all of a sudden, ever since our first call a few weeks ago, we've been ramping up revenue. We've been ramping up growth on a lot of levels, and we're prepping to launch our version 2 any day now. It's one of those things where it's completely perfect except for those last couple of little tiny bugs. And it's like when you're in your house and you could just hear that fly buzzing around and you can't see the darn thing anywhere. But we're pretty confident we're just days away. And that new version is what we've been really thinking is going to drive revenue, and spike a lot of the metrics. So we're excited for that. But even ahead of that, to be able to see the uptick, and to be able to really correlate it to a lot of what you and I have gone over and the strategies and the mindset that you've provided me with, is just, freaking cool, man. For lack of a better articulation.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, that is so exciting for me. You and I have talked, off of recording, in that it's so important for me to do work that matters, and the results of that work to have, a positive benefit in the world, not just now, but for years to come. And the older I get, Corey, the more important that is to me. And listen, as you know, we're planning to do sort of a where are they now segment down the road. And I don't know if this is in the cards for you, but I can picture you guys are going to have such growth and be on such a trajectory for revenue that if you wanted to. If you don't want to, spend the next 30 years being the CEO of Shedwool, I think you could probably exit that and have a pretty hefty payday. What do you think?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, and we're actually taking some small steps toward that end already. We've got some potential acquirers that have kind of given us some pretty nitty gritty. Here's what they want to see. Here are the metrics that they're tracking, but we're on the radar of the executive team and the acquisition team of 2 potential acquirers, and I think it's very possible. And my team's starting to feel it as well. They're starting to come up with exit strategies, and they're throwing numbers out there. And they're actually one of the companies that's looking at us as a potential acquisition came to us through one of my salespeople. That they had the idea, and we talked about it in the meeting, and they kind of took the ball and ran with it. So. You never know what the future holds, but I think you may be prophetic with that one, Bob.
Well, it'll be interesting and fun to see how it plays out, and I know people love to catch up on that Where Are They Now episode to see exactly what happened with Corey, and of course, they'll be able to track your progress anyway by going to Shedwool.com and seeing what's up there, and I expect that the client list, logos of client lists at the bottom of your website will grow and grow and grow and get more impressive.
Yeah, well, we just put someone in our demo yesterday that seems pretty excited about it. They're a national concept, and their logo alone would be a game changer for us, put it that way.
That's fabulous. Well, listen, Corey, it's been really good working with you, and I just I'm excited for your future. I'm excited for Shedwool's future, and you and your wife are going to have to make sure you got your swimsuits up to date, and if you do end up getting acquired for a big chunk of money, you guys it'll give you a lot of options that you don't have currently, right?
Yeah, and we're fortunate, so we were able to do some things and see some places already, but she's already got her whole wish list. She's got our first year planned when I don't have to work 100 hours a week, that's for sure.
There you go. Well, you know what they say, happy wife, happy life.
That's it.
I'm sure you can hear the excitement in Corey's voice. I believe with what we created for Shedwool, the emotion-based impactful benefit statement, which some might call a tagline, plus the marketing and prospecting strategies we armed them with, they will take their success to stratospheric heights. I'm excited for their future. This podcast is made possible because of the work I do in helping businesses achieve higher sales and larger margins. All of our clients get our help with strategies that take their success to a much higher level. Some of them get chosen to be featured on this podcast. Can we help you? Reach out to me and let's talk.